The airport terminal pulsed with restless energy, a current of voices, footsteps, and rolling suitcases flowing in every direction. Screens above flickered with flight numbers, while the smell of burnt coffee and disinfectant hung in the air. It was early morning, but the hall was already packed with travelers, their faces wearing the same mixture of fatigue and anticipation. Arthur adjusted the strap of his leather bag as he walked beside Catherine. She looked immaculate, as always. Her beige trench coat fell perfectly against her tall frame, her dark hair pulled back into a bun that revealed delicate pearl earrings. To anyone watching, she was the image of grace and control. But Arthur, after years together, noticed things most wouldn't. Her grip on his hand was too tight, her palm damp, her steps slightly rushed, as if her body wanted to be anywhere but here. "You're nervous," Arthur said softly, half a statement, half a question. Catherine forced a laugh that didn't quite land. "Airports make me anxious. You know that." Her smile was quick, vanishing almost as soon as it appeared. Arthur studied her face. He had always admired how she could steady herself, even under stress. Yet today something was off. Her eyes darted toward the security checkpoint ahead, then back to him, then forward again, as though rehearsing each step in her mind. They joined the line. The hum of conversation around them was broken by the metallic clink of luggage bins being stacked, the mechanical voices announcing, "Please remove belts, shoes, and laptops from your bags." Catherine slipped off her coat, her movements brisk, precise. Arthur followed, still watching her. When it was their turn, Catherine handed over her passport with a practiced smile. The agent, a man in his late 20s with sharp cheekbones and a neatly pressed uniform, slid it onto the scanner. The machine beeped. His eyes narrowed. He scanned again. Beep. This time, he frowned, his expression tightening like someone trying not to reveal too much. Arthur felt a ripple of unease. He leaned closer, whispering, "Everything okay?" The agent didn't answer immediately. He stared at the screen, then at Catherine, then at Arthur. Finally, he cleared his throat. "Sir, could I speak with you privately?" His tone was professional, but the urgency in his eyes betrayed something more. Arthur blinked, surprised. "Me? What?" Catherine tilted her head, her lips parting slightly as though she might protest, but then she pressed them shut. Her fingers brushed the strap of her handbag, tightening around it until her knuckles whitened. Arthur hesitated. "What's going on?" The agent's jaw flexed. He lowered his voice, so low Arthur barely caught it. "Please, just a minute." He motioned a few steps away from the line. Arthur turned back to Catherine. She gave him a small, encouraging smile, but her eyes didn't match. They were too wide, too alert, almost watchful. He followed the agent, stepping out of the flow of passengers. His pulse quickened as the sounds of the terminal seemed to dull around him, like the world was fading, sharpening only on this moment. The agent leaned close, his voice no more than a breath. "Listen carefully. You need to leave now. Don't go with her." Arthur froze. What are you talking about?" "That's my wife." The agent's eyes darted past Arthur, landing briefly on Catherine, who stood with her arms folded, her gaze pinned on them. Then the agent leaned even closer, his words sharp, urgent. "It's worse than you think." Arthur's chest tightened. He opened his mouth to demand answers, but before he could, the agent slipped a sealed folder into his hand. The paper was stiff, official, heavy with a weight Arthur couldn't yet understand. "Read this later." "Away from her," the agent murmured. His voice cracked slightly, betraying nerves, but his stare was steady. "Trust me. Don't let her see it." Arthur stared at the folder, his hand trembling as he tried to conceal it against his coat. Behind him, Catherine shifted her stance. Her smile was back, warm and effortless, but her eyes, those eyes, were fixed on him with the sharpness of a blade. Arthur suddenly felt the ground tilt beneath him, as though the airport's steady hum had transformed into a storm of questions he wasn't ready to face. And in that moment, he realized, whatever Catherine was hiding, it was about to change everything. Arthur's hand lingered on the folder hidden beneath his coat as he walked back to Catherine. He could feel the edge of it pressing against his ribs, sharper than paper should ever feel, like a blade waiting to cut his life in two. He forced his breathing to steady, smoothing the nervousness off his face before she noticed. Catherine was waiting, arms folded, her handbag balanced against her hip. Her smile was there, the smile that had won him over years ago, elegant and poised, but her eyes were restless. They flicked to him, then to the line of passengers moving forward, then back again, as though every detail around her mattered. "Well," she asked lightly, "what did he want?" Arthur swallowed. His throat felt tight, dry. "Nothing serious. Just some kind of system glitch, I think." Her eyes narrowed, only for a second. Then she tilted her head, giving a gentle laugh. "Airports are always disorganized. Come on, let's not let it ruin the trip." She reached out and brushed her fingers against his sleeve before turning back toward the conveyor belt. Arthur followed, his mind racing. She placed her handbag in a tray with careful precision, then slipped off her heels. The movements were ordinary, routine, yet Arthur noticed how her jaw clenched when she handed the bag over, how her eyes lingered on it as if the very idea of losing sight of it filled her with dread. He passed through the scanner, trying to mask the turmoil building inside him. The weight of the folder was unbearable. His instinct screamed to open it immediately, to rip the seal and confront whatever truth was inside. But Catherine was right there, and Victor's warning echoed in his skull. "Read this later." Away from her. They collected their things and walked toward the boarding gates. Catherine's arm slipped around his, her touch soft, familiar, but now heavy with unspoken tension. To strangers passing by, they must have looked like the perfect couple, a husband and wife heading to Paris for a romantic getaway. Arthur felt trapped inside the image. They found seats near the gate, a wide window framing the tarmac where planes taxied like giant beasts preparing to leap into the sky. Catherine pulled out her phone, scrolling swiftly, her lips pressed into a thin line. Arthur leaned back, staring at her from the corner of his eye. Who was she texting? Who was on the other side of those messages? She slipped the phone away with a sigh. "We got time. I'll get us some coffee." Arthur nodded, though his chest tightened. The moment she walked away, the world seemed to hold its breath. He pulled the folder out just enough to see the insignia stamped across the seal. Bold. Official. The kind of thing no ordinary traveler should be handed at an airport. His hand shook. He slid a finger under the flap, hesitated. Not here. Not yet. But the curiosity gnawed at him, savage and relentless. Arthur, his head snapped up. Catherine stood a few steps away, holding 2 cups and a cardboard tray. Her eyes landed on his coat for a fraction of a second. Arthur shoved the folder back inside, heart racing. She walked over gracefully, sitting beside him as though nothing had happened. "Here, just the way you like it. Black, no sugar." She pressed the cup into his hand. Her smile was calm, practiced, flawless. But Arthur felt the shift. Did she see? Did she know? He forced a smile. "Thanks." The intercom crackled overhead. "Flight 318 to Paris. Boarding will begin shortly at gate 22. Catherine took a sip of her drink, then leaned into him. "Paris will be beautiful this time of year. We'll forget about everything else." Arthur's lips twitched into a smile, but it never reached his eyes. The folder pressed against him like a live wire. And in that moment, he understood something terrifying. The truth was no longer a distant shadow. It was with him now, walking beside him, smiling at him, holding his hand. And whatever was inside that folder was about to tear his world apart. The boarding announcement echoed through the terminal. Flight 318 to Paris is now boarding all passengers in Group A. Arthur's ticket crumpled slightly in his palm, slick with sweat. He rose to his feet beside Catherine, forcing a smile as she slipped her arm through his. To anyone watching, they looked like a loving couple about to embark on a romantic holiday. But to Arthur, the entire scene felt like theater, staged lines and rehearsed gestures. They joined the line. The murmur of voices blended with the rolling of suitcases and the occasional squeal of children. Arthur could barely hear it. His thoughts looped in a single rhythm. Don't go with her. It's worse than you think. When they reached the gate, Catherine handed both their boarding passes to the attendant. Her smile was poised, effortless. The attendant scanned them with a cheerful beep. Catherine thanked her warmly and walked down the jet bridge, tugging Arthur along. Arthur's eyes drifted to her profile as they moved. For years, he had trusted that smile. Now it seemed like a mask, flawless but hollow. Inside the aircraft, they settled into 2 seats by the window. Catherine took the aisle, Arthur the window, with her neatly placing her handbag beneath the seat in front of her. She smoothed her coat across her lap with an elegance that seemed deliberate, controlled. Arthur leaned back, pressing his forehead briefly against the cool window. Outside, ground crews moved with mechanical precision, guiding luggage carts and fueling trucks. He wished, desperately, that he could be one of them, ordinary, unburdened, not carrying a folder that threatened to unravel his life. Catherine turned to him, her voice soft. "You've been quiet since security. Is something wrong?" Arthur forced a laugh. "Just tired." Her gaze lingered on him, too long, too sharp. She reached out and adjusted his collar gently, her touch tender, but Arthur felt it like a blade grazing his skin. "You'll feel better once we're in the air," she said. The plane filled slowly, the hum of conversation growing around them. Families, couples, solo travelers, all oblivious. Arthur kept one hand on his coat, pressing down on the folder. He thought about opening it right then, but Catherine's eyes were on him, calm yet probing. He couldn't risk it. As the plane taxied, Catherine rested her hand over his. "I'm glad we're doing this. We needed time together." Arthur nodded automatically, but his mind flicked to Victor. The warning, the urgency in his eyes, it hadn't been the voice of a man making a mistake. It had been a man terrified of what Arthur didn't yet know. The plane lifted off, engines roaring, pressing them back into their seats. The city lights fell away beneath them, swallowed by clouds. When the plane leveled, Catherine closed her eyes, leaning her head back. Arthur studied her in the dim cabin light. She looked peaceful, beautiful, the same woman he had shared countless nights and mornings with. Yet his chest burned with unease. When her breathing steadied, Arthur slipped a hand into his coat. He drew out the folder slowly, resting it on his lap beneath the shadow of the tray table. His fingers hovered at the seal. Then Catherine stirred. Her eyes flicked open, finding him immediately. Arthur froze. Her gaze fell to the folder. For a fraction of a second, her expression changed, subtle, but undeniable. The warmth drained away, replaced by something sharper, colder. "Arthur," she said softly, her voice almost drowned by the hum of the engines. "What are you doing?" Arthur's throat went dry. "Just paperwork. From the office." She tilted her head, studying him. The mask returned, a delicate smile gracing her lips, but her eyes didn't soften. "You never bring work on trips. You always say it ruins the mood." Arthur swallowed hard, sliding the folder back into his coat. His hand shook. "Yeah, you're right." She reached for his hand again, her grip steady, almost possessive. "We'll have a wonderful time in Paris," she whispered. Arthur forced a nod, but inside, dread clawed at him. He could feel the folder pressing against him still, like a heartbeat separate from his own. He stared at the seat in front of him, the minutes stretching long. One truth became clear. He couldn't keep pretending. Whatever was in that folder, Catherine already knew. And, sooner or later, she was going to make sure he didn't. Cabin lights dimmed to a lavender hush. The aisle a slow river of carts and elbows. The seatbelt sign pinged off. A baby coughed somewhere behind them. Ice clinked into plastic cups. Catherine unfolded a magazine, eyes skimming but not reading, the corner of her mouth resting in that practiced smile. Arthur felt the folder against his ribs like a fever. "Water?" she asked, glancing over. "I'll stretch my legs," he murmured. He stood. She watched him go in the oval reflection of the window, small, careful, measuring. The aisle smelled of citrus cleaner and reheated meals. Arthur nodded to a flight attendant and slipped into the lavatory, locking the door with a soft click. The tiny room pressed in, fan humming, mirror too honest, blue light making his face look unfamiliar. He eased the folder out, hands shaking. The seal gave with a soft tear and a breath of paper dust. Inside, a cover sheet stamped with an insignia he didn't recognize, all angles and authority. Below it, a clipped stack, reports, photos, forms, organized with a precision that made his stomach turn. The first page, subject, Arthur H. A grainy black and white of him leaving his office 6 months ago, head down, tie loosened, private and ordinary, except someone had been watching. Lines of typed notes followed. Daily routines, coffee preferences, gym times, routes he took when he couldn't sleep. His throat tightened. The mundane had never felt so violated. He flipped to the next. Assigned asset, Catherine. No surname. A list of cover attributes. Profession, consultant. Demeanor, warm, reserved. Weaknesses to emulate. Perfectionism. Reluctance to discuss family. Beneath, a passport photo, Catherine and not Catherine. Same face, different hair, a different name in the small print. Julia. The first name hit him like a shoulder in a crowd. Julia, sharp, clean, anonymous. A name from a life he never knew. Arthur swallowed, turned the page. Surveillance stills. Catherine, Julia, across an ocean of places. A curb at night with a man whose posture suggested ownership, not romance. A tinted car, door opened for her by a gloved hand. A time-stamped hallway with a badge reader. The man appeared again and again. Early 40s, severe jaw, tailored coat. In a margin someone had scrawled, Philip, liaison. The letters were blunt, practical. Arthur recognized nothing and everything at once. The steady choreography of a world running behind their kitchen conversations. A memo paper-clipped to the stack. Mandate, proximity maintenance. Terms, maintain domestic credibility. Limit subject travel. Gain contextual access to project data, the Kessler contracts. His family's name sat there like a verdict. Farther down, a colder line, the font somehow smaller. Contingency. If subject informed, initiate Astor H12. Redacted blocks followed, a field of black bars. One word escaped beneath the ink. Extraction. Arthur's breath went shallow. The fan hummed louder. He leaned on the tiny sink, pulse thrumming in his wrists. This wasn't petty duplicity. It was design. Catherine hadn't stumbled into lies. She had been built for them. Something slid free from the stack, a glossy photo. Catherine at a cafe terrace, summer light on her face, laughing at someone just out of frame. On the table, her handbag, the same one she'd guarded at security, lay half open. Inside, not lipstick, not keys, metal glinting, unfamiliar, nested in foam. A note below, device B3, retain on person. He pressed his knuckles to his mouth. All the small things coalesced, the late calls, the water running, the time she guided him away from certain topics with a kiss or a joke. Not chance. Craft. A soft rap at the door. Sir? Everything okay? A flight attendant, polite concern threaded through. Just a minute, he said, surprising himself with how normal his voice sounded. He skimmed the remaining pages. A schedule grid with their future mapped cleanly. Dinner with friends, cancel, Paris, proceed, debrief, CGT3. His seat shook faintly. He couldn't tell if it was turbulence or his legs. He slid a reservation card from pocket at the back, Terminal 3, room L17, and without thinking, folded it once and tucked it into his sock, the paper warm against his skin. He stacked everything back, careful to mimic the order, pressed the folder flat, and drew a long, steadying breath. The mirror showed a man who could pass for calm if he didn't blink too long. When he returned, Catherine looked up before he reached the row. Her magazine lay open to a travel spread, untouched. Her smile was patient, as if she'd been counting seconds. All right, she asked. Yeah. He sat, fastening his belt. He could feel the card against his ankle like a whisper. L17. Catherine studied him, then brushed imaginary lint from his sleeve, a tender habit turned forensic. You were gone a while. Long line, he said. She took a sip of water, set it down without looking away. You know, when we land, we shouldn't rush to the hotel. Casual tone, careful phrasing. There's a lounge in Terminal 3 that's quiet. We could freshen up first. Arthur's skin prickled. Terminal 3. He watched her eyes as she said it. They couldn't flinch. They never did. He nodded slowly, as if it were an ordinary suggestion. The engine's hum filled the space between their breaths. The cart rattled past with biscuits and tea. Catherine leaned back, eyelids lowering, a rest that read more like an exercise in stillness than sleep. Arthur stared at the oval window. High, thin clouds slid by like silk. He pressed his heel into the floor to feel the card, to prove to himself this wasn't imagined. Partial truth, that's what he had. Enough to shatter the picture, not enough to see the whole frame. He turned slightly. Catherine's lashes cast delicate shadows on her cheeks. Her hand rested, open, palm up between them, almost an invitation. He could take it. He could pretend this plane was still pointed toward a simple vacation. Instead, he folded his fingers together in his lap, knuckles tight, and let the silence say what he could not. The cabin lights dimmed further as the plane settled into its long, steady cruise. Around Arthur and Catherine, the hush of drowsy travelers spread. Seat backs reclined, headphones slipped on, pages of novels turning under muted reading lamps. For most, this was the calm between departure and arrival. For Arthur, it was the tightening coil of dread. He kept his hands folded in his lap, knuckles white, the folder pressed back under his coat. Every few minutes, his eyes flicked to Catherine. She looked the picture of serenity, legs crossed neatly, head tilted against the headrest, her breathing slow and measured. To anyone else, she was a wife at peace. To Arthur, she was a cipher, unreadable, dangerous, and now undeniably connected to something larger than he had ever imagined. His gaze dropped to her handbag, stowed carefully at her feet. He remembered the photograph in the file, the same bag, open, revealing the glint of metal inside. His chest tightened. If the picture wasn't doctored, she was carrying something that could upend everything. Arthur shifted slightly, careful not to wake her. He slipped a hand down toward the bag, fingers brushing against the leather strap. His pulse roared in his ears, every move deliberate. If she opened her eyes now? But Catherine didn't stir. Her lashes rested against her cheeks, her lips parted in shallow breaths. Arthur eased the zipper a fraction. A muted rasp broke the silence, and he froze. His heart pounded so loudly he swore the nearest passenger could hear it. He waited, holding his breath. Catherine shifted slightly, sighing in her sleep, then stilled again. Slowly, Arthur parted the bag wider. Inside lay the familiar clutter of travel, a wallet, compact mirror, tissues neatly folded. But beneath them, tucked into a foam casing, was a device. Metallic, compact, studded with small dials and a narrow screen. It looked nothing like a phone, nothing like anything he had seen before. Arthur's stomach dropped. The folder's photo hadn't lied. He quickly zipped the bag closed, withdrawing his hand before Catherine could sense movement. His body sagged back into the seat, sweat cooling on his forehead. He stared at the back of the seat in front of him. The image of the device burned into his mind. The intercom crackled. Ladies and gentlemen, this is your captain speaking. We'll be over the Atlantic for the next 6 hours. Sit back, relax, and enjoy the flight. Relax. The word felt cruel. Arthur's thoughts spiraled. The documents had named him specifically, his routines, his life, his family's company. Catherine wasn't just hiding something. She was using him, had been using him from the very beginning. Every kiss, every laugh, every whispered word late at night, strategy. He tried to recall their first date, the nervous smile she gave him, the way her hand brushed his across the restaurant table. Now, he wondered, was even that rehearsed? He glanced at her again. For a moment, her expression softened. Not calculated, not cold, just weary. Almost sad. But as quickly as it came, the look vanished, replaced by the same peaceful mask. Arthur shifted in his seat, torn between rage and heartbreak. The folder's words echoed. Contingency. If subject informed, initiate Astor, age 12. Extraction. The word rattled around in his head. Extraction of what? Him? Information? Or his life? A subtle nudge broke his thoughts. Catherine's hand, still resting on the armrest between them, brushed against his. Her eyes remained closed, her lips curved faintly upward. It could have been the unconscious gesture of a sleeping woman, or the deliberate signal of someone who knew far more than she let on. Arthur swallowed hard, pulling his hand back into his lap. His mind screamed at him to act, confront her, alert the crew, do something. But another voice cautioned. One wrong move, and whatever game she was playing could turn deadly in seconds. He leaned his head against the cool, oval window, the hum of the engines a steady reminder of how far he was from safety. In the darkness of the cabin, surrounded by strangers drifting into dreams, Arthur realized the cruelest truth of all. He was trapped thousands of feet above the ocean, seated beside the woman he thought he loved, yet didn't truly know at all. And she, awake or asleep, might already know that he knew. The steady drone of the engines filled the cabin, a low lull that coaxed most passengers into sleep. Reading lights glowed like tiny stars in the dimness. A flight attendant moved quietly through the aisle, checking seatbelts, adjusting blankets. For everyone else, the long night crossing the Atlantic was calm. For Arthur, it was suffocating. He hadn't moved since zipping Catherine's bag closed. His body sat still, but inside his chest, panic fought with fury. He could still see the device, small, metallic, alien, burning in his memory like a brand. And he could still hear Victor's words whispering through his thoughts. Don't go with her. It's worse than you think. Catherine shifted in her seat. Her head rolled gently against the headrest, eyes fluttering open. She turned toward him, her lips curling into a sleepy smile. You're awake. Arthur forced a nod. His voice was tight. Yeah, couldn't sleep. Her gaze lingered on him, too sharp for someone just waking. Then she leaned closer, her voice dropping into a whisper. You've been restless since security. Something's wrong, isn't it? Arthur's stomach nodded. Her tone was tender, concerned, exactly what a loving wife would say. But it felt rehearsed, as if she were trying to draw out a confession. He swallowed hard. Just work stress. Still running through my head. Catherine's eyes searched his face. For a moment, her mask slipped. Only a moment, but enough. Her smile faltered, replaced by a flicker of something else. Calculation. She tilted her head slightly, studying him like a puzzle she was close to solving. Arthur, she said softly, almost too softly for him to hear over the engines. You've never been good at lying. The words froze him. His blood turned to ice. She leaned back in her seat, stretching her legs out casually, but her eyes never left his. If something's bothering you, you should tell me. Secrets are dangerous, especially between us. Arthur tried to steady his breathing. I don't know what you mean. Catherine's smile returned, calm and unshaken. She reached down and adjusted the strap of her handbag, pulling it closer to her feet as if shielding it. You know exactly what I mean. Silence pressed between them. Arthur turned toward the window, but he could feel her gaze on him, unwavering. His reflection stared back at him in the glass, pale, drawn, almost unrecognizable. Minutes dragged. The cabin lights dimmed further as the crew encouraged passengers to sleep. Catherine reclined her seat and pulled a blanket over her lap. You should rest, she murmured. Paris will be busy. We'll need our energy. Arthur didn't answer. His mind spun too fast to allow sleep. Every detail, every inconsistency in their years together circled back to this moment. Late-night calls, trips she never explained, her aversion to discussing her family. The folder hadn't lied. The device wasn't imaginary. And her words, you've never been good at lying, were not a slip. They were a warning. Catherine closed her eyes again, her breathing deepening in practiced rhythm. To anyone else, she looked asleep. But Arthur didn't believe it. Not anymore. He shifted slightly in his seat, testing. Her lashes didn't flutter, her breathing didn't change. But he felt it in his bones. She knew. She knew he had the folder. She knew he had seen too much. Arthur stared at her for a long time, the cold dread solidifying into something sharper. This wasn't about whether she loved him or not. This was survival. And if the documents were right, if extraction meant what he feared, then Catherine wasn't just hiding the truth. She was waiting for the moment to decide whether he lived to see it. The cabin rocked gently as the aircraft hit a pocket of turbulence. Overhead bins rattled, plastic cups trembled, and a few passengers stirred awake. A baby let out a sharp cry, quickly hushed by its mother. Arthur gripped the armrest, not from the jolt, but from the steady, gnawing tension seated inches away from him. Catherine's eyes opened again, calm and alert despite the turbulence. She glanced at Arthur's clenched hands, then at his pale face. "You hate turbulence," she said softly, her voice carrying the warmth of years together. "You always have." Arthur gave no reply. His chest was tight, every muscle wound like wire. She leaned in slightly, lowering her voice so only he could hear. "But you've never been this tense. Something else is eating at you." Arthur shifted in his seat, forcing a thin smile. "I told you it's work." Catherine studied him, her gaze unblinking. "Work doesn't make you flinch like that." Her words were gentle, almost sympathetic, but there was an edge beneath them, sharp and deliberate. The plane jolted again, a shudder that sent overhead lights flickering. A few gasps rippled through the cabin, but the seatbelt sign remained dark. Catherine reached out, resting her hand lightly on Arthur's arm. To the casual eye, it was an act of comfort, but to Arthur, it felt like restraint. "Arthur," she whispered, "you can trust me." His breath caught. Trust. The word tasted bitter now. He pulled slightly away, pretending to adjust his position against the window. Catherine let her hand fall back, folding neatly in her lap, but her eyes lingered on him with quiet intensity. Arthur tried to focus on the sounds of the cabin, the rustle of blankets, the muffled voices of flight attendants preparing drinks, but everything blurred into background noise. His thoughts replayed the folder's contents in vivid fragments. His name, his routines, the photograph of her bag, the note about Terminal 3. Catherine shifted again, this time turning her body more fully toward him. "Do you know why I wanted this trip?" she asked. Arthur forced himself to look at her. Her face was calm, almost tender, but her eyes were searching his, waiting. "Because we needed time together," he answered cautiously. She smiled faintly. "That's what I told you." She paused, then leaned closer, her lips near his ear. "But that's not the whole reason." Arthur's pulse hammered. "Then what is?" Catherine leaned back, watching his reaction with the precision of someone who had practiced the moment 100 times. "You'll understand when we land." His stomach dropped. The words weren't a reassurance. They were a promise. Or a threat. Another tremor shook the cabin. This time, Arthur noticed Catherine didn't so much as blink. She sat perfectly steady, her posture composed, her breathing measured. A woman unfazed by turbulence, or perhaps by anything at all. Arthur's hand brushed the edge of the folder under his coat. The instinct to confront her, to demand answers right there, clawed at him. But the thought of extraction echoed louder. If she already suspected what he knew, pushing her now could be fatal. He turned back toward the window, his reflection pale against the black ocean of night outside. Catherine's voice broke the silence once more, quieter than before, almost tender. "I don't want you to be afraid of me, Arthur. Not tonight." The words sent a chill racing through him. Not tonight. As if tomorrow, or later, fear might be exactly what she expected. Arthur sat frozen, the hum of the engines droning endlessly as the reality sank in deeper. The woman beside him wasn't just hiding the truth. She was controlling the pace of his discovery, step by step, like a conductor guiding a symphony he never chose to hear. And the turbulence outside was nothing compared to the storm waiting when the plane touched down. The aircraft had settled into its long, steady rhythm again. The earlier turbulence passed, but Arthur's nerves had not. Every bump, every flicker of light, felt like a warning he couldn't ignore. Around him, passengers were cocooned in their own worlds. Headphones on, blankets pulled high, soft snores rising in the dark cabin. It should have been a moment of calm. But beside him, Catherine was wide awake. She leaned slightly toward him, her voice low, meant only for him. "Arthur, you look like you're miles away." He forced a tight smile. "Just tired." Catherine studied him, her eyes sharp in the dim glow. "No," she whispered, "it's more than that. You've been pulling away from me all night." She let the words hang for a beat, then added, "I don't want us to drift apart." To anyone listening nearby, her tone might have sounded tender. To Arthur, it was suffocating. He shifted in his seat, pressing his shoulder against the cold window. "We're fine." Her hand moved to his armrest, fingers brushing against his sleeve. A gentle gesture, but he knew better now. It was never just what it seemed. Her eyes flicked toward the aisle, then back to him. "Sometimes," she said softly, "I think you underestimate how much I know about you." Arthur's breath caught. The words struck too close to the truth. Did she know he had opened the folder? Did she know what he saw? His chest tightened. He couldn't keep sitting here, silent, waiting for her next move. He needed help, needed someone outside of this private storm. His eyes drifted toward the aisle. A flight attendant was passing slowly with a tray of water cups, her smile warm, oblivious. Arthur hesitated, then leaned slightly forward. "Excuse me," he said, voice steady but strained. "Could I have some water?" The attendant nodded, handing him a cup. As her hand brushed his, Arthur's mouth went dry, not from thirst but from desperation. He wanted to say something, to ask for help, but Catherine's gaze was on him, unblinking. The attendant smiled politely and moved on. Arthur clenched the cup, the cold plastic digging into his fingers. His chance slipped away. Catherine tilted her head, her smile faint, almost sad. "You were about to say something, weren't you?" Arthur froze. She leaned closer, her perfume faint but sharp. "You should be careful with words. Once they're out, you can't take them back." Her tone was gentle, but her meaning clear. A warning. Arthur turned back to the window, forcing a sip of water to steady himself. His reflection stared back, pale, drawn, haunted. Behind that reflection, Catherine's face hovered, calm, watchful, a presence he could neither escape nor fully understand. Minutes passed in heavy silence. The plane's engines droned, constant and unyielding. Arthur's mind raced, searching for some path forward. He thought of Victor again, of the urgency in his voice. "Don't go with her. You should have listened. You should have left." But it was too late now. Catherine finally broke the silence. "You know," she whispered, "I thought this trip would make things easier. But maybe it's just making everything harder." Arthur forced his voice steady. "What do you mean?" She turned her face toward him, her eyes reflecting the dim cabin lights. "Because soon, Arthur, you'll see me as I really am." The words lingered, heavy and cold, as the cabin seemed to close in tighter around him. Arthur pressed his back into the seat, heart hammering. The folder in his coat, the device in her bag, the cryptic words on those pages, all of it pointed to one truth. He wasn't just sitting beside his wife anymore. He was sitting beside a woman who had been preparing him for something he couldn't yet name. And every minute that passed brought him closer to finding out what. The hours stretched long over the Atlantic. Outside the oval window, there was nothing but blackness. The vast, silent ocean broken only by the occasional flicker of starlight above the clouds. Inside the cabin, most passengers had slipped into uneasy slumber, their heads lolling against headrests, their snores and sighs merging with the steady hum of the engines. Arthur couldn't rest. His body was still, but inside his nerves vibrated like wires ready to snap. The folder, hidden beneath his coat, pressed against his ribs. The memory of its contents haunted him. The surveillance photos, the notes about his life, the word extraction. He replayed Catherine's last words. "Soon you'll see me, as I really am." He turned slightly. Catherine wasn't asleep. Her eyes were open, reflecting the faint glow of the reading light above them. She had been watching him. "You've been quiet a long time," she murmured. Arthur forced his voice steady, trying to rest. Her lips curved into a faint smile. "You never could lie to me." She tilted her head, her expression unreadable. "Do you know why I married you, Arthur?" The question pierced through him. His throat tightened. He wanted to say love, but the folder's documents mocked him. He hesitated, then whispered, "Why?" Her eyes softened, but not in the way he remembered from their past. This was something sharper, deeper. "Because you were exactly the man I needed." Arthur's breath caught. "Needed?" Catherine leaned closer, her voice lowering to a whisper. "You were reliable, predictable, easy to build a life around. And you had what they wanted. His pulse hammered. Who's they? She leaned back again, folding her arms across her lap. The people who shaped me. The people who gave me my role. She paused, her gaze drifting toward the window, her reflection ghostly in the glass. I wasn't free to choose you, Arthur. But don't think that means I felt nothing. Her words twisted inside him, a cruel combination of confession and denial. So all of it, he asked, his voice trembling. The years, the trips, the nights together, were they all lies? Catherine's eyes flicked back to him, steady, unwavering. Not all lies. Sometimes I let myself believe it was real. Sometimes I even wanted it to be. Arthur's chest tightened. It was worse than betrayal. It was ambiguity. Truth laced with deception, love tangled with duty. You should sleep, she said suddenly, her tone soft but commanding. We'll be in Paris soon, and you'll need your strength. Arthur shook his head. No, not until you tell me what you're planning. Catherine studied him for a long moment. Then, with deliberate slowness, she reached down to her handbag. Arthur's stomach dropped. His eyes followed her hand as she unzipped it. She paused, watching his reaction. Arthur tensed, ready to call out. But instead of the metallic device, she pulled out a small envelope, crisp and folded. She handed it to him. Arthur stared at it. What is this? Her smile was faint, tinged with something sad. The first piece of the truth. His hands trembled as he opened the envelope. Inside was a single photograph, grainy, taken from a distance. It showed Arthur outside his office building, briefcase in hand. Beside him stood a man Arthur didn't recognize, tall, with a sharp suit and a severe jawline. But the note scrawled across the bottom made his blood run cold. Target confirmed. Subject secured. Arthur looked up, his voice shaking. What does this mean? Catherine leaned in close, her eyes glistening. It means, Arthur, that your life stopped belonging to you the day we met. And Paris is where everything changes. She leaned back again, closing her eyes as though she had revealed nothing more than a casual secret. Arthur sat frozen, the photograph trembling in his hand. He finally understood. The turbulence he feared wasn't in the air. It was sitting right beside him. The walk through Charles de Gaulle felt endless. Travelers streamed past, families herding children, businessmen tapping at phones, couples clutching guidebooks. Their chatter and laughter swelled around Arthur, but none of it reached him. His world had shrunk to Catherine's hand locked around his, and the two men in dark suits guiding them forward. Philip led the way, his stride purposeful, the crowd parting instinctively for him. The second man, taller and silent, kept a half step behind, his eyes flicking from Arthur to the shifting flow of passengers. Their presence was like a cage, invisible bars surrounding Arthur, pushing him in one direction. Here, Philip said, steering them toward a side corridor. The noise of the main terminal thinned, swallowed by the sterile hum of fluorescent lights. Signs overhead pointed to Terminal 3, restricted access. Arthur's pulse thundered. The card hidden in his sock, room L17, Terminal 3, burned against his skin. Victor's breadcrumb. Was this the same destination? Or a trap disguised as one? Catherine's fingers tightened around his. Almost there, she whispered, her voice calm, steady. Too calm. Her eyes, though, betrayed a flicker of tension. They reached a service door. Philip swiped a badge across the reader. The lock clicked, and the men guided them inside. The hallway beyond was silent, clinical. White walls, gray floors, the faint scent of disinfectant. Their footsteps echoed sharply. Doors lined the hall, each with small metal plates. L10, L11, L12. Arthur's stomach lurched as they passed L15. The numbers climbed. He knew what was coming. L17. Philip stopped in front of the door. He turned, his expression smooth but commanding. Inside, please. Arthur froze. His heart pounded so hard it hurt. He glanced at Catherine. She was watching him, her face unreadable. Go on, she said softly. It's okay. It wasn't okay. Nothing about this was okay. Every nerve in Arthur's body screamed at him to run, to fight, to do anything but walk into that room. And yet, Catherine's grip, Philip's stare, the silent man looming behind, it all pressed him forward. Arthur stepped inside. The room was stark. A table. 4 chairs. A single overhead light casting harsh shadows. It looked like an interrogation chamber disguised as a meeting space. Philip gestured. Sit. Arthur lowered himself onto the chair, every muscle taut. Catherine sat beside him, folding her hands neatly on the table. Philip and the other man remained standing, sentinels by the door. For a long moment, no one spoke. The silence was unbearable. Finally, Philip broke it. Arthur, you've been part of something important, though you don't realize it. His tone was calm, measured. Your family's company, the contracts, the research, all of it has value. Arthur's chest tightened. That's what this is about. His voice cracked. Business. Philip's lips curved into the faintest smile. Business, politics, survival, they're all the same game. He leaned slightly forward, and Catherine has played her role perfectly. Arthur's eyes shot to her. Role. Catherine's face was steady, but her fingers twitched against each other. She looked at Arthur, her eyes soft with something like regret. Arthur, she hesitated. I was assigned to you. That part is true. The words slammed into him like a blow. Even knowing, even suspecting, hearing it aloud shattered something inside. His throat burned. So our marriage, our life, it was nothing. Catherine's eyes glistened. Not nothing. Her voice was fragile now, breaking through the mask. I didn't choose how it began, but I chose to stay. And somewhere along the way, it became real for me. Arthur stared at her, torn between rage and desperate hope. Real? You call this real? You lied to me every day. Catherine reached out, her hand trembling, as if to touch his. I lied about who I was, not about what I felt. Philip's voice cut in, sharp as a blade. Enough sentiment. Arthur needs clarity. He straightened. You were never in danger until now. But circumstances have changed. Someone leaked information. Someone warned you. Arthur's breath hitched. Victor. Philip's gaze hardened. Who spoke to you at the airport? Arthur's mind raced. If he said Victor's name, what would happen? He felt Catherine's eyes on him, pleading silently. Not pleading for herself, for him. I don't know. Arthur said finally, forcing his voice steady. Just routine checks. Philip studied him for a long, agonizing moment. Then he nodded slowly, as if filing the answer away. Catherine exhaled softly, relief flickering across her face. Arthur sat rigid in his chair, every thought spinning. The truth was unraveling, piece by piece, but the most important question still remained. What did they plan to do with him now? The walk through Charles de Gaulle felt endless. Travelers streamed past, families herding children, businessmen tapping at phones, couples clutching guidebooks. Their chatter and laughter swelled around Arthur, but none of it reached him. His world had shrunk to Catherine's hand locked around his, and the 2 men in dark suits guiding them forward. Philip led the way, his stride purposeful, the crowd parting instinctively for him. The second man, taller and silent, kept a half-step behind, his eyes flicking from Arthur to the shifting flow of passengers. Their presence was like a cage, invisible bars surrounding Arthur, pushing him in one direction. Here, Philip said, steering them toward a side corridor. The noise of the main terminal thinned, swallowed by the sterile hum of fluorescent lights. Signs overhead pointed to Terminal 3, restricted access. Arthur's pulse thundered. The card hidden in his sock, room L17, Terminal 3, burned against his skin. Victor's breadcrumb. Was this the same destination? Or a trap disguised as one? Catherine's fingers tightened around his. Almost there, she whispered, her voice calm, steady. Too calm. Her eyes, though, betrayed a flicker of tension. They reached a service door. Philip swiped a badge across the reader. The lock clicked, and the men guided them inside. The hallway beyond was silent, clinical. White walls, gray floors, the faint scent of disinfectant. Their footsteps echoed sharply. Doors lined the hall, each with small metal plates. L10, L11, L12. Arthur's stomach lurched as they passed L15. The numbers climbed. He knew what was coming. L17. Philip stopped in front of the door. He turned, his expression smooth but commanding. Inside, please. Arthur froze. His heart pounded so hard it hurt. He glanced at Catherine. She was watching him, her face unreadable. Go on, she said softly. It's okay. It wasn't okay. Nothing about this was okay. Every nerve in Arthur's body screamed at him to run, to fight, to do anything but walk into that room. And yet, Catherine's grip, Philip's stare, the silent man looming behind, it all pressed him forward. Arthur stepped inside. The room was stark. A table. 4 chairs. A single overhead light casting harsh shadows. It looked like an interrogation chamber disguised as a meeting space. Philip gestured. Sit. Arthur lowered himself onto the chair, every muscle taut. Catherine sat beside him, folding her hands neatly on the table. Philip and the other man remained standing, sentinels by the door. For a long moment, no one spoke. The silence was unbearable. Finally, Philip broke it. Arthur, you've been part of something important, though you don't realize it. His tone was calm, measured. Your family's company. The contracts. The research. All of it has value. Arthur's chest tightened. That's what this is about. His voice cracked. Business. Philip's lips curved into the faintest smile. Business, politics, survival, they're all the same game. He leaned slightly forward, and Catherine has played her role perfectly. Arthur's eyes shot to her. Role. Catherine's face was steady, but her fingers twitched against each other. She looked at Arthur, her eyes soft with something like regret. Arthur, she hesitated. I was assigned to you. That part is true. The words slammed into him like a blow. Even knowing, even suspecting, hearing it aloud shattered something inside. His throat burned. So our marriage, our life, it was nothing. Catherine's eyes glistened. Not nothing. Her voice was fragile now, breaking through the mask. I didn't choose how it began, but I chose to stay. And somewhere along the way, it became real for me. Arthur stared at her, torn between rage and desperate hope. Real? You call this real? You lied to me every day. Catherine reached out, her hand trembling, as if to touch his. I lied about who I was, not about what I felt. Philip's voice cut in, sharp as a blade. Enough sentiment. Arthur needs clarity. He straightened. You were never in danger until now. But circumstances have changed. Someone leaked information. Someone warned you. Arthur's breath hitched. Victor. Philip's gaze hardened. Who spoke to you at the airport? Arthur's mind raced. If he said Victor's name, what would happen? He felt Catherine's eyes on him, pleading silently. Not pleading for herself, for him. I don't know. Arthur said finally, forcing his voice steady. Just routine checks. Philip studied him for a long, agonizing moment. Then he nodded slowly, as if filing the answer away. Catherine exhaled softly, relief flickering across her face. Arthur sat rigid in his chair, every thought spinning. The truth was unraveling, piece by piece, but the most important question still remained. What did they plan to do with him now? The fluorescent light above the table buzzed faintly, casting shadows that cut across Arthur's face. He sat rigid in the chair, every nerve raw. Philip's eyes were steady on him, a hunter measuring his prey. The silent man by the door stood motionless, his presence heavy, watchful. Catherine sat beside Arthur, her hands folded, her face calm, too calm for a woman who had just admitted her marriage was built on lies. Arthur's chest rose and fell quickly, his breath sharp. Why am I here? He asked, his voice cracking. Philip's smile was thin, almost kind, but the words that followed were not. Because you know now. And once you know, Arthur, there are only 2 paths. You serve, or you disappear. Arthur's stomach lurched. Disappear? Catherine's head snapped toward Philip. That wasn't the agreement. Her voice was sharper now, the mask slipping. He was never supposed to be harmed. Philip didn't look at her. Agreements change. You know that, Catherine. Arthur's eyes darted between them. What is this? What do you want from me? Philip leaned forward, resting his hands on the table. Your family's contracts, the research tied to your company, your access to people we cannot reach. You are valuable. but only if you cooperate. If you resist, he shrugged, the gesture casual, terrifying. There are other ways. The word extraction from the folder screamed in Arthur's head. He gripped the edge of the chair so hard his knuckles whitened. Catherine's voice cut through. Arthur isn't resisting. He's scared. You can't threaten him like this. Philip finally looked at her, his gaze hard. Don't confuse your assignment with sentiment. Arthur turned, staring at Catherine. Assignment. That's all I was. Her eyes glistened. Arthur, listen to me. She reached for his hand, trembling now. Yes, it started that way. I was told to watch you, to stay close. But somewhere along the line, I stopped following orders. I stopped pretending. Her grip tightened. I fell in love with you. That was real. Arthur's throat closed. Rage and heartbreak twisted together. Love. His voice was a whisper. You call this love? Catherine's eyes brimmed with tears. I never wanted this ending for you. Or for us. Philip straightened, impatience in his tone. Enough. Arthur chooses now. He gestured sharply. Work with us, or you never leave this room. The silent man stepped forward, his hand brushing against his jacket. A weapon, Arthur realized, hidden but ready. His pulse thundered. Arthur looked at Catherine. For a second, everything froze. Their years together, the lies, the laughter, the nights they held each other, all compressed into this single, shattering moment. Her whisper broke the silence. Trust me. Arthur's mind spun. Trust her? After everything? And yet, in her eyes, there was something raw, desperate, something that felt real. Philip moved closer, his shadow long across the table. What's your answer, Arthur? Arthur's voice shook. I won't be your prisoner. The room crackled with tension. Philip's eyes darkened. He nodded to the silent man. Then it's extraction. The man reached into his jacket, and Catherine moved. In one fluid motion, she swung her handbag onto the table, the zipper already open. The metallic device Arthur had seen flashed in her hand. She slammed it against the table and twisted a dial. A piercing hum filled the room, sharp and disorienting. The silent man staggered, clutching his ears. The overhead light flickered violently. Philip cursed, lunging toward Catherine, but she was faster. She grabbed Arthur's wrist. Run! The door burst open. A figure appeared, Victor, the airport agent. His uniform was gone, replaced with plain clothes and a badge clipped at his belt. Arthur, he shouted. This way. The room exploded into chaos. The silent man stumbled forward, reaching for his weapon. Catherine shoved Arthur toward Victor. Go! Arthur spun back. Catherine. Her eyes locked onto his. For the first time, there was no mask, no role, just raw emotion. I'm buying you time. Don't waste it. Philip lunged at her, grabbing her arm, but she twisted, slamming the device against the floor. The hum grew deafening, the air itself vibrating. Victor pulled Arthur out into the corridor, dragging him down the hall. Behind them, shouts and the screech of alarms filled the air. Arthur stumbled, his heart breaking even as adrenaline kept him moving. The last image burned into his mind was Catherine, standing in the flickering light, defying Philip, her face fierce and unguarded. By the time they reached the exit, Victor shoved him into a waiting car. You're safe now, Victor panted. But you need to understand, this isn't over. Arthur sat trembling, staring at the terminal disappearing behind them. Safe but shattered. He couldn't tell which truth cut deeper, that Catherine had lied about everything, or that, in the end, she had sacrificed herself for him. Either way, the woman he thought he knew was gone, and Arthur was left with nothing but questions and a love story that had never truly belonged to him.